Pace Journal. What a fantastic platform and what a fantastic show we've got here. The review and preview show. Guys, we are back. Today, I think this is the most excited I've ever been for a show. We've got, if you're on YouTube, you can see a very special guest. If you're on the podcast, you're going to hear about him very soon from Tymal Mills. Today, guys, we're going to be breaking down the IPL auction, something that, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. here in Barbados to watch. It was fantastic, man. A lot of buys, surprises, some expectations as well, and we're going to get into each and everything.
Welcome to the Pace Journal. Welcome to the Pace Journal.
Tymal Mills, the international caliber fast bowler. Great to have you back, sir. And Tymal, I want you to introduce our new guest on the show. It's great to have him, and I think he's going to provide some excellent value to our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, cheers, mate. We obviously we said we're going to get some guests on throughout the series, throughout the shows, just to give a different perspective, a different insight, and instead of just hearing our voices over and over again. So got into my phone, text Nikesh Rughani, who's joined us. Done some commentary work with him, reporter for BBC over here in England. And I know he's a man that's all amongst everything to do with Indian cricket and English cricket. So I thought he's the perfect man to come and join us. Nikesh, thanks for joining us, mate.
Absolute pleasure. No, thanks for having me. As you say, always a pleasure talking about Indian cricket, English cricket, just cricket in general. I know Nikhil, you said you woke up at 6:30 for the auction there. Us in the UK, we've been waking up at 4 a.m. to watch the India-England Test series. We've been staying up through the night to watch India play in Australia as well. So an absolute pleasure to be here and to talk about what I love.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, let's get straight into it. And Nikesh, it's great to see, I'm not sure if you know, but my fellow Cindy on the call as well. So great to have two Cindy's here and obviously Tymal. But Nikesh, let's get into the IPL really, because firstly, I want to break down some massive headlines. Obviously, a lot coming out of the auction. Chris Morris, the most expensive IPL buy in the history. It was Pat Cummins last year, 2.24 million US. Yes. And Tymal Mills knows a bit about going for big money at the IPL auction, but we're going to get to that soon. Guys, first of all, tell me, Tymal, I'll start with you. Were you surprised when you heard or maybe watched Chris Morris, the most expensive player ever?
A little bit, yeah. I'm sure he was as well. Obviously, being the IPL auction, you never know exactly what's going to happen. Anything can happen, and anything does happen. But look, RCB had the chance to retain him for 10 crore at the end of last year. They decided not to, with the view to try and buy him back this year. And they were obviously in the hunt for him. I think they dropped out just below 10 crore, didn't they? And then the bidding kept going and going and going. So they might be kicking themselves a little bit because they could have had their man back for a much cheaper price. But look, it's a great time for Chris Morris. He was injured at the start of the IPL, wasn't he? He had just gone. But as soon as he came into the side, he was brilliant in terms of swinging the new ball. His economy rate was brilliant, getting his Yorkers in at the death as well. And he's obviously a very, very good lower order batsman as well. So that was the theme of the IPL this year, wasn't it? The bowling, fast bowling all rounders were the guys that were in high demand, and Chris Morris obviously kicked that off in style.
And Nikesh, what about you? Were there any surprises from your side?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Chris Morris was a big surprise, but as Tymal alluded to there, when it comes to fast bowlers, particularly those who can provide a few useful runs down the order as well, particularly when they're from overseas, for some reason IPL franchises go Gugar over them. And yeah, it is obviously, a crucial part of any side to have people who can provide runs all down the order. But it just seems that when these fast bowlers come from abroad, particularly the likes of South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, countries like that, they seem to fetch ridiculous sums of money. I mean, Jai Richardson, 14 crores for him as well. He's never played in the IPL previously. He's been a star for the Perth Scorchers, of course, in the Big Bash League. And, he's, for those of you who follow Big Bash cricket and Australian cricket, you'll know he's a very useful cricketer. But 14 crore for somebody like him, a lot of money. Once again, 4 players going for over 14 crores, which in English pounds is sort of well over £1 million. Sort of, it's almost sort of £1 to 100 rupees these days. So 1.4 million plus we're looking at in the region of as well. So absolutely huge money. But, Carl Jamieson, 15 crores as well. A lot of these teams, I suppose, learning from the lessons of last season and, the RCB with Carl Jamieson, Glenn Maxwell, two massive money buys, just realizing that, look, we need to do something. We've got all these holes in our side, and we're going to splash the cash. And, certainly as far as IPL is concerned, there doesn't seem to be much of a recession, does there?
Yeah, spot on. Just before we continue, Tamal, allow me to clarify this one point. People might see this mug in the clip. I'm by no means a Chelsea fan. I don't like Chelsea. It's just this is all we had in the house. So forgive me for that, guys. But
Nikesh he's a big Leicester City fan, so he's loving life at the moment.
Okay.
He's having a great season.
I don't look that far down the table now, Nikhil.
Wow, that's kind of. It was a big win for you on the weekend, but the fast bowlers dominated this auction. You look at Sam Billings. I mean, I laughed so badly when he tweeted after he went unsold the first time. He tweeted his girlfriend asked him, why is he not a bowler? And it's spot on because the amount of bowlers that went in this auction. And to me, it was a surprise to see a lot of unproven bowlers at the IPL go for such big money. Tamal, of course, Pace Journal, this is a fast bowling show, and we love our fast bowlers. I'm sure, Tamal, you, Shabazz, everybody in the Pace Journal side was buzzing really to see the amount of fast bowlers. And Tamal, even yourself, I'm sure if you were, available, I'm sure you would have even fancied your chances. So were there any surprises in terms of the fast bowlers going so rapidly in the auction?
Yeah, there was some surprises, I think, in terms of the amounts of money that was spent. I don't think the players as such, because they're very good players. But you look at the likes of Carl Jamieson, 15 crore to RCB, Jai Richardson 14 crore, and Riley Meredith for 8 crore to the Punjab Kings. None of those guys have played any franchise cricket outside of their own countries, if I'm not mistaken. Carl Jamieson, he's not played a lot of T20 cricket in general. He's only played, I think, 4 internationals and I think only 30 T20 games domestically in New Zealand between Canterbury and Auckland. And then Jai Richardson and Riley Meredith have only played in the Big Bash. They don't have any experience playing in the subcontinent in India, so there is a little bit of a risk there. I think what Nikesh said earlier about Australians, Kiwis, South Africans. Obviously, there's a big Australian presence in the IPL, isn't there? In terms of coaches, Kiwi presence as well. Stephen Fleming, Ricky Ponting, Mike Hesson, Simon Katic. Historically, there always has been. So there is that little bit of familiarity with these guys. So there's a little bit more risk involved there because they haven't done it. They haven't proven it. Unlike Chris Morris, who has played, he's played IPL for years and years and years. He's played international cricket for a long time as well. But on the flip side of that, there was a lot of chatter on Twitter saying, why are these guys going for so much and some other guys so little? The likes of Aadil Rashid from England went unsold and people saying, why isn't he getting picked? But frankly, there's obviously a huge depth in Indian spin. You could argue that these spinners aren't as good as Aadil Rashid, but the gap between your Indian spinner and Aadil Rashid, for example, is much smaller compared to these overseas fast bowlers and the local fast bowlers. That's what puts the premium on fast bowlers from overseas if they have good availability, which most countries do for this year's IPL. Then there's going to be a bidding war, and there were plenty of bidding wars this year.
Yeah, don't give away too much about Aadil Rashid because I want to get to him when we get to another section of our show. But before I move on from this segment, Nikesh, I would like to know, we saw a lot of fast bowlers, but we also saw a lot of all-rounders as well. We spoke about Glenn Maxwell. You have Krishnappa Gautam, that he surprised me, 9.25 crore to Chennai Super Kings. That was a big buy. And then even someone like a Daniel Christian. So in terms of the all-rounders, were you surprised? And do you put it down to the fact that India produced so many top-order batsmen that in this draft, they were more seeking, of course, a smaller draft, they were more seeking for the fast bowlers and the all-rounder side of things?
Absolutely. And I think just touching on the fast bowlers, obviously the trend that we've seen in India as well, with them producing so many quality fast bowlers, fast bowling's become cool again in India. And these franchise owners, they want the best of the best playing for them. And, it's exciting when you've got somebody steaming in the pace of Jofra Archer or something like that, bowling bouncers in T20 cricket. It's another dimension to the game. But you're right, in terms of all-rounders, that is one area that I suppose India may have struggled in producing those real top all-rounders, particularly fast bowling all-rounders. that play at that sort of international level or the top level of the IPL. And, that's why somebody like Dan Christian, he's done such a good job over the years playing in county cricket over here in England. He's a solid performer. Not one of the sort of sexy names, I suppose, that you would normally associate with the IPL. He has been there before with the Royal Challengers Bangalore, but he can do a job. He can bat, he can bowl. He's a good fielder. He's a good team man. He's been a captain, and he's such a valuable player just to have in that squad. He might not play all the games, but certainly when he's called upon, he's going to be ever reliable. Glenn Maxwell, of course, played so many years of IPL. You know what you're going to get with him. He's always going to go for big money. He's called the big show after all. Krishna Pagotham, I mean, you mentioned him. He's gone for quite a lot of money, 9.25 crore. But the Chennai Super Kings, they love that sort of spinning all-rounder. They've had quite a few of them over the years. Ravi Jadeja is obviously still there. He's the number one star in their side as far as spinning all-rounders go, but not a lot of backup. So I suppose somebody like Krishna Pagotham coming in, age of 32, he's been there, he's done it. You know what you're going to get with him. Moeen Ali as well, another one with the Chennai Super Kings, £700,000, 7 crores, most expensive Englishman in this auction. I just wonder how much that performance in the Test match in Chennai provided the Chennai Super Kings something to think about. He can do it at Chipuk on those slow wickets, a bit of big hitting at the end, 8 or 9 wickets in the match, was it? So again, absolutely full value that these guys can give you with both bat, ball and in the field. And, lots of these franchises like those, I don't want to call them bits and pieces cricketers, but, they're just as good with the bat and the ball in the field. They're just good team men and very flexible in terms of being able to bat anywhere in the order as well. I think that's crucial in IPL. Somebody like Moeen, we've seen, he's opened the batting for England. He's batted as far down as 9 or 10. He'll just do it. He'll just get on with it. Whatever his captain wants, he'll get on with it. And I think these types of cricketers who are flexible, can do a bit of everything, absolutely full value as far as the IPL auction is concerned.
Fantastic, man. Thank you so much for that, Nikesh. Sorry about that. Yeah. Tymal, finally, before I move on from this, I have a special question to ask you because it's something that's plagued on my mind a bit. And it's a perspective that I think a lot of people don't know. Now, as a player yourself, you've been in this position. I'm sure you've went to the, going into the IPL auction, you've been undrafted, unsold, and you've also been sold. Of course, you remember the sold part to Royal Challengers Bangalore. But tell us from a player perspective, what's it like to go through the auction? And I'm sure you're nervous, but I would love to hear the feeling. Do you turn on the TV? Do you watch it, or do you just sort of put it to the side and check it after? Tell us about it.
Yeah, look, it's a different experience. It's different to any other. Obviously, it's the only auction that goes on in world cricket, isn't it? All the other T20 franchise tournaments are done in a draft format, so it's a little bit different. You set your own category, and then you can either get picked to that category or you don't. Whereas in the IPL, you put a reserve price for yourself, and then you hope your name comes up. You would have noticed yesterday a lot of names didn't even come up in the auction. If teams decided that they didn't want to, if these players didn't get requested. So obviously you submit your paperwork, you decide your entry level, and then it is literally a case of hoping for the best. Hope you've got a good agent who's able to get into the ear of teams and the analysts and the owners to get a feel. Looking back to the year that I got signed by RCB, I had my agent text me the night before, kind of a breakdown team by team, which team was interested, which team wasn't interested, how much money this team had, how much money that team didn't have. So a lot of those guys that went for big money yesterday would have known that they were going for big money because they would have been told that the teams were interested in them. But obviously you never know exactly how it is, and that doesn't change the feeling of when you see your little face pop up on the bottom of the screen and you're watching it and you're just waiting for that first bid. That's all you want. You just want one bid to get underway, and then often others will come around that as well. So it depends where you are in the world as well, if you're watching or not. There were guys, I'm sure it would have been in the middle of the night somewhere if you're in New Zealand, or as you say, it was early morning in the Caribbean. So imagine waking up after a nice sleep to your phone blowing up and you're suddenly a millionaire overnight. So it's the one situation in the world, world cricket, maybe even world sport, where you can literally be almost made a millionaire overnight. Obviously, you've still got a couple of months to the IPL itself. Nobody's getting paid right now, so you've got to hope you don't get injured between now and then. And there's still pro rata payments and everything, and you've got to pay tax, of course. So it's not quite as clean cut as everybody seems to think sometimes. But it's an amazing experience to go through, but it can also be a very nerve-wracking and unpleasant feeling if you have expectations of getting picked up and you don't, or you don't go for as much money as what you thought, or you end up going to a team that it looks like you're not going to play. Look, there'll be some guys there that got picked up and they'll look at their side and think, I'm not really going to play a game here. You look at Rajasthan, they've got Jofra Archer, Ben Stokes, Joss Buttler and Chris Morris for huge money. Those four guys are going to play. Those four guys are going to play the vast majority of the game. So if you're a Liam Livingston who got picked up at his base price 75 lakh, he's probably looking at that thinking, I could be having 2 months in India without playing a game. So you're obviously, you want to be there, but you can get a little bit picky, I guess, sometimes when you're looking at the situation, because obviously as a professional sportsman, you just want to play.
Yeah, fine. Great insight there, because I think it's an area which a lot of people, and you mentioned the player rotation, because I remember Glenn Maxwell in his first season for the Mumbai Indians, $1 million US, and he didn't play until the latter half of the season. I guess that's how it goes when you deal with such high caliber of players. But guys, that was a great first segment. I want to go to the second one now. It's something special that I've thought up, and I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed planning it. It's called the massive buys and the bargain buys. So I'm going to give you both a name, and I would love to hear from you whether you think it's a massive buy or if it was worth, and if it's a bargain buy or even a steal. You tell me, okay? So Nikesh, I'll start with you. And how better to start than Chris Morris, 16.25 crore. Was this a massive buy or was this a bargain buy?
Definitely a sort of massive buy. It's not a bargain when you're talking about 16.25 crores. I think he will add a lot of value to the Rajasthan Royals. But as Tymal was saying, it's difficult with the Rajasthan Royals to fit all those overseas players into their side. When you've got 4 players who you're paying massive money to, it doesn't really allow you much flexibility. What if Chris Morris has a couple of bad games? Are you going to be scared to drop him because of how much you've invested in him, because of all the headlines it's making? I think it's quite difficult. There's a lot of pressure with a price tag like that, as we saw way back in 2009 with when Kevin Peterson and Andrew Flintoff were both the first players who were auctioned for over £1 million. A lot of pressure on them. They didn't quite live up to what was expected of them, even though they put in some decent performances throughout the season. It wasn't quite at that sort of £1 million level for those days. And 16.25 crores, he's going to have to deliver week in, week out. So a lot of pressure on him, but yes, only a massive buy.
Yeah, look, you'd say it was a massive buy, especially, as I said, considering RCB could have got him back for 10 crore if they just wanted to retain him. It looks like that obviously blew that out of the water. You can't ever say he's a bargain buy if he's the most expensive buy in IPL history in terms of overseas players at an auction. So yeah, massive buy for sure. But look, Rajasthan, they'll be pleased with their purchase, I'm sure.
All right, guys, more left field now. Riley Meredith, 8 crore. Now, just before we get into this, I've actually done my research on him, because to be honest, I've seen him a couple of times at the Big Bash and a few other places, but I didn't know a lot about him. So I asked someone, a trusted source from the Big Bash, and they've said, Nick, he can bowl 145 miles per hour, 145 Ks, and that's what these IPL teams are looking for. However, the person was not too sure about his death bowling. Tymal, first of all, I'll start with you. What have you seen of Riley Meredith, and was he worth that massive price tag of 8 crore?
I played with Riley at Hobart Hurricanes a couple of years ago. Absolutely cracking lad. One of the, a guy I love spending time with. He ended up taking my place. So I didn't have a brilliant Big Bash a couple of years ago, but they stuck with me as the overseas player. And unfortunately, I was bowling pretty poorly, and then they dropped me for the semi-final, and Riley took my place. So that was, and since then his career's kind of taken off, and he's put in those regular performances for Hobart, and he's now in and around the Australian side. So
he should send you a couple of crore then.
I won't say that at all. I sent him a text though as soon as it happened, and he replied straight away. So he's a really, really lovely kid. He's talented, yeah, definitely. He can bowl 145 plus. Can swing the new ball as well. But as I mentioned earlier, he hasn't played any franchise cricket outside of the Big Bash. So he doesn't have that experience to call upon. So we don't know what the crowd situation is going to be like in India come the IPL time, but those full houses at the Wankhede or the new any of these stadiums, Pune, etc., that they might go and play at. It'll test you definitely. And 8 crore, I'm sure he didn't expect that either. So it's a tricky one. You'd probably say massive buy, just considering that he's unproven, but he's definitely got the potential there to be a match winner.
Yeah, for me, I would go along with that massive buy. Although I have seen him a few times in the Big Bash, and he's always impressed whenever I've seen him, whenever I've commentated on any sort of Hobart Hurricanes games. But as Tymal said, he's not played any franchise cricket outside of Australia. Very different conditions in India, different pressures as well. I think that is a huge thing as well when you talk about the IPL, the amount of pressure that's on you when you go for this kind of big money. Punjab desperate for some more bowling reinforcements. They've really struggled to sort of get that team balance right, and they've gone for a couple of quicks in this auction for big money as well. But I just think, with the unproven nature of somebody like Riley Meredith, massive buy.
Shakib Al Hasan, 3.20 crore. Nikesh, start with you. Now, people may be wondering, how is it that Shakib's price is so low? I think it has something to do with his availability, which we're going to find out closer to the tournament. But if he is available for a good part of the tournament, is that a bargain, Nikesh, or do you still think that, it wasn't worth the risk?
Absolutely. I definitely think it's a bargain. He's been the best all-rounder in world cricket consistently at the top of those rankings for a good number of years, for basically the past decade. He's slipped down a little bit now because he's obviously not been playing for a year or so, but he came back into the Bangladesh side. A lot of eyes were on him thinking, has he still got it? Is he going to be, take a little while to get match fit and things like that? But he's come back, and he's pretty much at the level he always was. He's clearly been practicing during that 1-year suspension that he had. And he gives you so much value, particularly in Indian conditions with his left arm spin. He's a very underrated batsman. I say probably get into any IPL franchise in the top 5 or 6 as a pure batsman, even if he couldn't bowl. He's that good. And the price he's gone for, absolutely, you've got to say bargain.
Yeah, I'd agree as well. I think looking at the KKR side, there's going to be a bit of rotation there. Obviously, Andre Russell and Sunil Narayan are your first 2 names on the team sheet, pretty much along with Owen Morgan, Pat Cummings. So there's going to be some competition to get into the side. But I think for the price that they paid, if he has full availability, it's definitely a great sign, especially if Sunil Narayan maybe struggles a little bit. You've got a more than capable spin bowling all-rounder to come in. I think he's probably a better 50-over player than he is 20-20 player. I think in 50-over cricket he is outstanding with the versatility he gives you. But I think they'll be very, very happy with that bit of business that they did yesterday.
Last couple of names here, guys. Stephen Smith, 2.20 crore on the cheaper side after playing for the Rajasthan Royals last year consistently. Now, I'm assuming, is my assumption, that this is after availability. You look at Delhi's side, I can't really see how he breaks into their top 5 because they've got a pretty much compact top 5. The only way I could see him playing is when we do get to Delhi is for like a Shimron Hetmeyer, he bats at 3 and then you push Stoinis to 5. But did you think, Tymal, first with you, did you think, Delhi got away with one here and they were actually able to only pay 2.20 crore for obviously someone of the caliber of Steve Smith, one of the world's best batsmen?
Yeah, obviously his strike rate's always the thing that people bring, the thing that teams and pundits bring up with Steve Smith. He's not your big hitter who's going at 150, 160 strike rate more of the time. So again, you've got to look at where he fits in and around that side. I think to getting close to his base price is fair enough, but guys like Alex Hales that you'd say are more explosive, he went unsold. So I think that's pretty fair enough. Steve Smith going in and around his base price. Obviously, Ricky Ponting, head coach of the Delhi Capitals, he'll fit in well there. Obviously, knows all about Steve Smith. So, I think it's a good bargain buy for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, somebody of the caliber of Steve Smith, 2.2 crores, it's got to be a bargain in anybody's book. He's not as explosive in the shortest format of the game as he is in particularly Test cricket, and he's come into his own in ODI cricket in recent times as well. Never really quite been that superstar as far as the IPL is concerned, or T20 cricket is concerned. He'd be a good squad player for the Delhi Capitals, but as Tymal mentioned, they've got a pretty settled top order there, and certainly to be able to bring in somebody like Steve Smith, if one of your top guys is out of form, it's not a bad guy to have on the bench, is it?
For sure. Guys, time is getting away from us. Before I get to my final name, I know, Nikesh, you mentioned a very special name, Cheteshwar Pujara. I'm just going to let you speak on him quickly before we go to the final name. Were you surprised by any means? 50 lakhs to the Chennai Super Kings. He got an astounding round of applause in the auction room.
Yeah, I was giving him a round of applause at home as well. I've known him for a good few years. Budgie, as I like to call him, he's been over here. He's played county cricket. He's a real nice guy. One of the absolute best guys I've ever met in terms of being international cricket. So down to earth. He's an underrated white ball player. I've been saying this for a number of years, but he's not played IPL since 2014. He's never really quite done it in the IPL. He's not really had a good run in the side with any of those franchises that he's played for previously, Punjab being the last one. I thought his time was long gone. I was surprised that he was still putting his name in for these auctions. But, he's proven in Test cricket, at least, I know completely different format, that he's become, one of the stars of Indian cricket in the last couple of years, ever since that win down in Australia in 1819. And, he's been talked about as, perhaps one of these guys who could get on top of spin bowling on slow, low pitches in India. I think he'd be a really useful player at the top of the order. He might not play every game, he might not play many games, but if the Chennai Super Kings perhaps have already qualified early on for the top four, they want to give some of their squad players a chance. He could open the batting perhaps in those conditions, in the power play, just play good shots and beat the infield, get them off to a decent start. If he was to come in a little bit lower down, he's an excellent player of spin. He likes to attack the spinners. He comes down the wicket. He drives well. He finds gaps against spin bowling. I'm just really pleased for him. It's been such a long time. He's one of the stars of Indian cricket, but he's not been involved in the IPL for 7 years or so. When you see some of the other names who get picked up year after year, whether it be batsmen, bowlers, whatever you might think, players who have never really done it, and this guy's given a lot to Indian cricket, and I think it's a nice little reward for him to be picked up by the CSK, and hopefully we get to see him in action and get to see him scoring some runs.
Final name, Tymal. I just come to you because obviously time is getting away from us, and we want to get through everything. Umesh Yadav. Now this is a very interesting one because he went at his base price of 1 crore. Now here's my question to you, Tymal Mills. You see guys like Riley Meredith, Jai Richardson, overseas fast bowling talent going for massive money. Then you have a guy like Umesh Yadav, who's proven in the IPL, has played many years before. We spoke about him in our India-England setup. We were going to speak about him in our third test preview as well. Were you anyway surprised that, first of all, Umesh Yadav went unsold the first time and was then picked up in the accelerated round? Were you by any means surprised that you have these overseas players going at such big money, but then someone of the caliber of Umesh Yadav, international quality, is not being picked up? Were you surprised by that?
Yeah, yes and no. Remember, obviously, these guys in India, obviously, they've grown up. There's no recency bias there, is there? They're not a new name. They're not fresh on the block. Haven't made that impact. They're not that kind of hot, sexy pick, as you might say. Umesh Yadav, he's a bit limited. He's pretty much a power play bowler, early stages bowler. He has been, especially when he played for RCB recently. He's into his 30s now. If he doesn't come off in the power play, you're probably scratching around if he's going to be bowling at the death. But I remember I was watching when Yadav came up and he got sold. The Delhi Capitals were very, very pleased. It was almost like they couldn't quite. It was like, was nobody going to bid for him? Okay, we'll take him at 1 crore. Definitely, we're more than happy to have him. They're going to have some availability issues as well. I think it looks like that Rabada and Nokia might be missing for some of the IPL due to a series that South Africa are going to be having with Pakistan. So they were in the market for some fast bowlers. They went pretty hard at Tom Curran as well, who I'm sure will get some games if those guys do miss time. So they did need some fast bowlers. So they were obviously as I said, they didn't look quite like they could believe their luck when they managed to pick up Yadav at his base price. So they're very happy.
Great guys, great. Great segment there. And I want to speak now because you mentioned some, both of you have mentioned some. some of the snubs of the IPL. Firstly, I'll go first. I was very surprised that Aadil Rashid, simply because of the fact that 9 international matches in India, 25 wickets, this T20s I'm talking about. So I was definitely surprised about that, because I think the caliber and class of Aadil Rashid, the fact that he's not been given an IPL contract and now, I really thought this was the year for him. But it was a draft dominated by fast bowling. You got into that earlier. Alex Hales as well. 36s in the Big Bash. I thought he had a good chance. And then finally, Sheldon Cottrell. No West Indian bias, but I thought, he did a decent job for Punjab last year with the new ball. And you see some of these other guys which are picked to do that job. And I thought Cottrell could have replicated. However, the Indian franchise decided to go the other way. Nikesh, I'll start with you. Who were the massive snubs that you were surprised about?
Rashid definitely won. Hales as well, 534 runs in the Big Bash. One in particular, Marnus Labuschagne. Okay, he's not traditionally talked about as a T20 player. He's perhaps not as explosive in the shortest format of the game, but just going on Indian track record of selecting Australians for big money in the IPL, particularly one that has done so well against you, albeit in a different format in Test cricket. Very recently, I was surprised that nobody went for Marnus Labuschagne. He's certainly got the talent to be able to be a success, even if he's, again, one of these squad players who plays maybe a third of the games, half the games. He's a very reliable man to come in that sort of number 3-4 position in one of these sides, and he's certainly no mug in terms of being able to score at a quick strike rate. So we're quite surprised, especially when you consider that the Indians, they love an Australian. They love paying big money for Australians, but Marnus wasn't in their thoughts. But yeah, apart from him, you've got to say Aadil Rashid in these conditions. And Alex Hales, I mean, Hales not only snubbed by IPL, but being snubbed at the moment by England as well still. And you've got a feel for the guy.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think it'll be interesting. Obviously, England have very shortly got a white ball tour of India, and if Aadil Rashid goes there and cleans up, a few franchises will be on high alert for replacement deals and stuff as well. You have to remember the way these squads look now won't be how it lines up come a couple of months. There'll be guys that get injured. There'll be guys that have international commitments. There'll be replacement deals that happen as well. I was surprised that Hales went unsold, especially when David Malan got a bid from Punjab at a slightly higher base price, and they both just played in the Big Bash, and Hales outperformed David Malan clearly, leading run scorer in the competition. David Malan struggled a little bit, despite that obviously being in brilliant form for England in the last year or so. So two big ones there. I think Sheldon Cottrell probably a victim. I think similar to myself, when you go for big money one year, and even when you go for such big money, you have to perform, and even if you perform averagely, it looks worse than if you were to go for a smaller amount, if that makes sense. If last year he would have gone for 200, 300k and did the same performance, it wouldn't look as bad. But because you go for big money, it makes your performance look worse if you don't perform to that level. So I'm sure he'll be disappointed not to get picked up, but it's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. And as we've spoken about many times on this podcast, the flavors of the month and the big buys were quite clear from the off, and it proved to be that way.
Yeah, obviously, you did mention Cottrell. I'll just say the only one West Indian in this draft to be picked up is Fabian Allen. So I was kind of sad, given the fact that this is usually a West Indian dominated draft. But of course, there are players most of the players have been retained, and I think it's about 8 or 9 names that we'll be excited to see. But don't worry, West Indians, we'll be back next year in the mega auction. But guys, Tymal is very strict on me on time. He's going to get very mad at me if I go on for too long. So I'm going to come to each one of you very quickly. I would like your analysis on each team. We're going to look on a holistic view of the teams. Not really any predictions, but just how well you thought they did in the draft. So I'll go with you, Nikesh, first. You talk about Punjab Kings, a newly named franchise. They've made some interesting additions. Someone like a Shah Rukh Khan to bat in the middle order, where I think they may be a little vulnerable. He's a big name in Indian cricket, 5.25 crores. And then we mentioned the 2 seamers. How did they do for you?
Yeah, I think they've done pretty well. I mean, they've obviously spent a lot of money. We talked about Jai Richardson, Riley Meredith there with the quick bowlers. Shah Rukh Khan is a really interesting one. Tamil Nadu batsman, 25 years old, same name, of course, as the king of Bollywood, Shah Rukh Khan, and is one of the heroines of Bollywood who owns the Punjab franchise. Priti Zinta, of course, they made a nice headline that Priti Zinta buys Shah Rukh Khan for 5.25 crores. The Shah Rukh Khan, the cricketer, I think he was actually named after the actor. I think his mum was a big fan back in the day. But, he's played for Tamil Nadu, who just won the domestic Syed Mushtaq Ali Trophy in India, the domestic T20 competition there. He was a good performer in that tournament. He's a hard hitter in the middle order. They needed some more explosive batsmen down there in the middle. They've done well at the top with KL Rahul, Mayank Agarwal, but they needed to shore up in that area. Obviously, he's never played on this stage before, so it's quite a big risk. Quite a lot of money for an unproven performer. But if he comes off, then certainly with the addition of him, the couple of quicks as well, if KL Rahul and Mayank Agarwal can be consistent at the top of the order, perhaps they're one to look out for. I mean, they might be slightly light in the spin department, and when we were looking at Aadil Rashid, they were one of the franchises that a lot of people were saying could and probably should have gone for somebody like an Aadil Rashid, and probably could have got him for a very good price in the end as well. So that might be one area that they're slightly light in the spin department. But overall, a pretty good auction, I think, for the Punjab Kings now.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned that Indian price tag, because we've seen a couple of players in the past fail with that early price tag, and then in the second season, after acclimatizing, come back and do well. So Varun Chakravarti rings a bell straight away. But he'll definitely be one that will be interesting and waiting to watch. Samal Delhi, obviously, I thought in terms of the overseas players, they got replacements in every position. Sam Billings, Steve Smith as well. But they have a pretty, went to the final last year, so they have a pretty compact 11. And then you mentioned the fast bowler depth that they brought in with Umesh Yadav, etc. So how happy were you?
Yeah, I think they'll be very happy. Again, just looking at their list from who they drafted, they only had space to draft 3 overseas players: Tom Curran, Sam Billings as the backup wicketkeeper, and Steve Smith. As you say, the availability of Rabada and Nokia is going to be huge for them. If they are missing for chunks of the tournament, that will be a huge hole in their side, because those two were brilliant in the UAE in the recent IPL, weren't they? So they're going to have Chris Wokes as well, who didn't play in the last year. They've retained him. Stoinis, Hetmeyer. They've got a really strong overseas block of players, and then that top order, you got obviously Darwan, Rahane, Shah, Rishabh Pant, Ravi Ashwin, Mishra, Axar Patel. They're looking really strong. I think they'll be very, very happy with where they are. As you say, runners up last year, and I think they'll be really, really, really happy with how they're shaping up going into this season.
For sure, and an easy one for you now, Nikesh. Sunrisers Hyderabad only bringing in 3 players. However, I look at someone like Kedar Jadhav, and I think that's smart business given their struggles at number 4 last year, early in the tournament with Abdul Saman and some inexperienced players. Were you happy with the 3 picks that they brought in? It was basically 3 spin options, but they got an overseas option of Mujib as well, sort of like a backup for Rashid. How happy were you?
Absolutely, yeah. I think they've got a pretty solid squad anyway. Going into last season's tournament, they were one of the favourites on paper, at least, and they really struggled at the start. Came back very strongly towards the end. They've got all that firepower, as you mentioned, at the very top of the order. I think Kedar Jadhav is a very good smart buy. Can bowl you a few overs as well if needed. He can slot into that sort of middle order. And Mujib, that little bit of mystery spin from Afghanistan. Always one of the most sought after spinners when it comes to any of these franchise tournaments as well. And, very well led by David Warner, Kane Williamson. They've got a lot of leaders in there as well. Johnny Bairstow, Jason Holder as well. So certainly a lot of options. And I think they had a pretty much complete squad anyway, but some decent additions there.
Yeah, I think Sunrisers, just adding to that also, they've done it slightly differently to most of the other teams. If Mitchell Marsh, Jason Holder, obviously genuine all-rounders, but they've got no overseas fast bowlers, kind of out-and-out fast bowlers, whereas you look at most of the other teams, that's where they, invest a lot of their money in overseas players, whereas they like to go local. Bhuvi Kumar, Natarajan was one of the huge stories of the IPL just gone, so there's going to be big pressure on him to back that up. Siddharth Kaul, Sandeep Sharma, these guys, Khalil Ahmed, Basil Zampi, so they rely on their local fast bowlers. So that's always, you could argue, a little bit of a risk going into the IPL. So it'd be interesting. And also, they'll have a lot of fans in Afghanistan this year. They've got Rashid Khan, Mohammad Nabi, and Mujib Rahman. So they've got the 3 Afghanistani players, but 3 brilliant players in their own right.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic point you make about Sunrisers. The last thing I'll say is I would not want David Warner's job to pick between those overseas players, because people are definitely going to be disappointed. We saw, Kane Williamson have to miss out sometimes, Johnny Bairstow as well, to get in Jason Holder, to get in a Rashid Khan. It's going to be a very tough selection. I mean, this IPL it really provides something fantastic, man. Moving on, Nikesh, Chennai Super Kings, not a lot of business, but you mentioned Moeen Ali coming in. You thought that was a good buy. And then, of course, Cheteshwar Pujara, and Krishnappa Gautam was the real main ad for them. How satisfied do you think they should be?
I think Moeen Ali is an absolutely brilliant buy. We've seen him with the Royal Challengers Bangalore. He's often been in and out of the side, but he was always one of the favourites of Virat Kohli. You felt a player that he thought he could always rely on to get those runs, to bowl at least 3 or 4 overs in most of the games that he was to play in as well. I think he's going to have a massive part to play in this IPL season in particular. Krishnappa Gautam, he's been there, he's done it. They perhaps needed to maybe bring in a little bit more youth. When you look at the Chennai Super Kings lineup, they've got Suresh Raina coming back as well, which is obviously a massive boost for their batting order. He missed out in the tournament over in the UAE, but they have got a very sort of, I don't like to use the word old, but an aging side. A lot of senior players within that side. Perhaps not enough backup, I don't think, for somebody like a Faf du Plessis or somebody at the top of the order who could come in out of those particular buys that they've made. You've got somebody like Pujara, yes, but a completely different type of player. Maybe slightly light in terms of their youth in the field and things like that. They've got a couple of the best fielders in the world, of course, in Bravo and Ravi Jadeja, of course. But maybe you'd expect them to bring in a couple of younger, more exciting international players, which they haven't done. But I certainly think Mo is going to be a great signing for them. But have they got enough strength in depth? I'm not sure. They're an aging side. They will get some injuries. They will need a bit of rotation in there. And I'm not quite sure they've got enough quality in that backup on the bench to perhaps see them through as winners again.
One thing we do know, though, read you some names here: Jadeja, Mitchell Santner, Imran Tahir, Khan Sharma, Moeen Ali, Krishnappa Gautam. We know what type of pitches they're going to be at Chennai this year. There's going to be very, very little fast bowling played. You'll have Dwayne Bravo as an all-rounder, and then Sam Curran potentially. And you're not going to get an awful lot more fast bowling when you're playing at Chennai. So in preparation for that, if you're going there, make sure you're practicing your sweeps, and your reverse sweeps is going to turn.
Spot on. We even saw in the last test match, India-England second test, what happened in Chennai. So, yeah, definitely want to watch. Tymal, the Kolkata Knights Riders, we mentioned the addition of Shakib Al Hasan. Very strong spin department with Shakib Narain, Varun Chakravarti, Kuldeep Yadav, and a couple other names as well. Were you happy with the business? Obviously, bringing in the all-rounder and Shakib, probably for that balance and that depth, as you said, because I found they didn't replace Narain well, or weren't able to replace him if he wasn't doing well last year. So, were you happy with the business?
Yeah, they had a pretty quiet auction, didn't they? They didn't make any huge splashes. Shakib Al Hasan and Ben Cutting, the only 2 overseas players brought in. Harbhajan Singh was got picked up on the second go around. Some experience there. Karan Nair, Pawan Negi, all guys that have played in the IPL a lot over the years. But I think they'll just be hoping that they get progression from their young players that are already in the team. Shubman Gill's obviously really announced himself onto the world stage in Test cricket as well, so they'll be hoping that he makes the next step. And then their young bowlers, Mavi, Warrior, Krishna, those guys, those young fast bowlers that they give opportunities to, they'll be hoping that they kind of take the next step as opposed to what they've brought in from outside. And then the likes of Kuldeep Yadav, they were going to want him to kind of refine that form of a few years ago when he was spinning teams out all around the world for India and in the IPL as well. So it was a quiet day for them in terms of the auction, but they retained the vast majority of the bulk of their squad. Obviously Pat Cummins, Narain, Russell, Seifert, Lockie Ferguson and the like, and Owen Morgan obviously as well. So quiet today for there, but they'll be happy just how they filled out their squad, I think.
Yeah, Nikesh, Rajasthan Royals, we mentioned their big buy for Chris Morris. Basically, the 4 overseas players pretty stuck. But they also added some good pieces. Liam Livingston, 426 runs in the Big Bash. I thought he was destined for an IPL pick. And then Mustafiza Rahman, another backup as well. So do you think, Rajasthan have the side now to actually challenge and go into the playoffs this time?
Well, they've pretty much had the side on paper all along, haven't they? They've just not been able to make that final step. But as you say, you've got Ben Stokes, Josh Butler, definitely, Jofra Archer. They're going to be in the side along with Chris Morris as your first 4 overseas picks. So it's going to be difficult to fit in the likes of Liam Livingston, Mustafiza Rahman. you've got AJ Ty, you've got David Miller, you've got some very strong overseas in that squad as well. I think a good bit of business as well. Shivam Dubey, he's been there, he's done it. He's a very experienced IPL player as well. You've got the likes of Rahul Tewatia, who's done so well. Yashasvi Jaiswal, what a story that is with regards to him, future star of Indian cricket, I'm absolutely sure. So they've got very good balance in there. It's just keeping those overseas players happy, I suppose. The likes of David Miller, Liam Livingstone, they're probably going to have to miss big chunks of the season. Mustafiza Rahman as well, unless there are injury problems, which can happen. You can get your opportunity. I suppose we kind of saw that with Sunrisers Hyderabad as well. Johnny Bairstow was dropped. Jason Holder comes in and performs so well that Bairstow's never getting another look in. So it can happen. It's probably unlikely with the 4 overseas that they're going to start with that they're going to do too much dropping. But I suppose it's trying to keep that big squad happy. We've seen it in Premier League football, haven't we? When somebody like a Chelsea, the mug you had there before, they spend all that money. How do you keep the bench happy? And it's very different in cricket. Obviously, you can't bring people off the bench and things like that. So they've got a very good squad. They're very English heavy, owned by Manoj Badale, of course, the franchise, British Indian businessman. Likes his sort of English links in the team as well, and they've got a very good, strong English core, a lot of talented Indians as well, and I'd expect them certainly to be in the top 4 if they perform to even sort of 80-90% of their capability.
I left this Mumbai Indians for you because, sorry, just getting a bit of feedback there, guys, because they've gone with the 2-seamer, overseas seamer path last year. We saw Patterson and Kuntanal this year, going back to Kuntanal, and also bringing in Adam Milne, who's played in the Big Bash quite often. You know him well. He's known for bowling over 150 before. And they brought in some good pieces as well. Marco Janssen from South Africa, I'm excited about him. And James Neesham, a little backup for Kieron Pollard off the bench with some experience. So talk to me about the fast bowlers solely, though. Are you happy with Adam Milne and Nathan Kuntanal?
Yeah, I think, as you said, the fast bowlers were often the ones in demand, weren't they? Adam Milne just had a decent Big Bash for the Sydney Thunder, as you say, bowling some good pace. They obviously know all about Kolkata, having had him in the last year's IPL as well. So, again, the Mumbai Indians were just looking to retool, just add some depth to their squad at the various different positions. Obviously, defending champions once again. They are the strongest side on paper. I don't think you can deny too much about that. Retained, obviously, the vast majority of their squad. You think De Kock, Pollard and Trent Boult are going to be the first 3 names on the team sheet in terms of overseas players. So then you're looking at Chris Lynn, Neesham, Kolkata, Milne, and then Marco Janssen. I must admit, I'd never heard of this kid before. He's a South African left-arm quick, so I'll be sure to keep an eye on him. If they are able to get him a game now and then, it might just be there just for some experience, get a look at him. Obviously, only cost 20 lakhs, so very, very cheap. But yeah, they'll be very pleased. Obviously, Piyush Chawla as well, just added him in there, another spin option. Somehow he's only 32, I think I read. He's been around for maybe at least 25 years, but it'll be interesting to see if he gets a game or not. But yeah, I think the Mumbai Indians will be very happy and they'll be confident of retaining their title.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think some of the picks they've made are brilliant, and they're the holes that they kind of needed filling last season, if there were any holes in their side. We saw Saurabh Tiwari come in for a few games last season when they had a couple of injuries at the top of the order. I think they really struggled with him. He's kind of getting on a bit in age. He wasn't quite the performer that we've seen him in previous years. So I think somebody like a Jimmy Neesham, he's an all-rounder, of course, but could slot into that middle order somewhere if there are any injuries. Piyush Chawla as well, backup leg spinner. When Rahul Chahar was injured, they really struggled to sort of have any. They didn't have any other wrist spinners in their entire squad. So I think Piyush Chawla, that extra leg spinning option, just as a backup for Rahul Chahar to give him some good competition as well. Those were the 2 real areas that they perhaps just struggled to touch with last season. Didn't do them any harm in the end. They went on to lift the trophy again. But clever bits of business there.
Yeah, you mentioned Chawla. I actually think when you go to places like Chennai, you might see even both him and Chahar. So good piece of business for the Mumbai Indians. I thought getting him so cheap. Final team, Nikesh, is to you. Royal Challengers Bangalore. All I'll say is that people were saying, after AB de Villiers and Kohli, then what? And now they've added players like Glenn Maxwell. They've got the bowling pedigree of a Kyle Jamieson. Do you think this is the year well, don't tell me if you think this is the year. We'll get into that in the predictions episode, but just tell me about the business. How happy were you with the Royal Challengers Bangalore?
Yeah, I mean, certainly they've addressed some of those areas of concern, haven't they? So, yeah, what after AB de Villiers and Virat Kohli? Well, they certainly need Devdutt Padikkal, who they retained, to continue doing well at the top of the order. And if they can, then, somebody like Glenn Maxwell being given that free rein in those middle overs to just do what he does best and clear the ropes. I think that's a great bit of business. He knows the IPL so well. He knows these Indian pitches well. He's one of the most exciting cricketers in the world in the shorter format. Carl Jamieson, again, another good buy. Dan Christian, as I mentioned earlier, such a reliable player, with bat ball as a leader as well, and just an all-round team man. One of the exciting buys, I'd say, Mohammad Azharuddin, same name as, of course, the Indian legend, the former Indian captain as well. Again, I think he was named after that particular Indian legend. He plays for Kerala in the domestic T20, scored a 37-ball 100 in the recent domestic tournament over in India as well. Very exciting cricketer, very exciting batsman. They need a lot of these middle-order batsmen to the Royal Challengers Bangalore. But it has always been the bowling, hasn't it? That has been the real area of concern. And a lot of pressure on somebody like Carl Jamieson. Glenn Maxwell will probably bowl a few overs in there. They've got Adam Zampa, of course, who was their number one spinner last season. Maybe still slightly light in the bowling department. I would suggest Kane Richardson, Mohammad Siraj are all there as well. But Siraj had a decent enough season, bowled really well in some of the games. We saw him bowl some outstanding overs in that tournament. But at the death, coming back, opening the bowling is one thing. Coming back at the death, have they really got those death bowlers? I'm not quite sure. There's going to be a lot of pressure on some of these guys to perform. But a stronger squad than last season. But as with the Royal Challengers Bangalore, you just don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Guys, IPL 2021 is going to be fantastic. Nikesh Rughani, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tymal, thanks again. And I think IPL is going to be a great season. We hope to get you back on very soon, Nikesh. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Pleasure. Thanks very much, guys.
Yeah.
Take care.
Cheers, guys. Speak to you soon.
Welcome to the Pace Judge.